Okay, episode 2. Last time we spent the whole walk arguing about why specs beat vibes.
You argued. I mostly carried the coffee.
Fair. Today is the payoff, though. The full loop, end to end. Constitution, specify, clarify, plan, tasks, implement, verify, ship.
8 phases. That sounds heavy for something everyone keeps calling autonomous development.
That heaviness is the point. The tagline on the slide is the whole thesis. Spec in, software out. Humans at the gates, not at the keyboard.
Gates, plural. How many are we talking?
3. Spec approval, plan review, and the merge. Everything between those can run while you sleep.
So I keep my job, I just stop typing.
You get promoted from typist to judge, basically.
Honestly, the shape reminds me of what GitHub did with SpecKit and what Amazon shipped in Kiro. Spec file, plan file, task list, then the agent runs.
Same family, yeah. Different tools, same 8 stations. Think of it as a factory line. Raw intent goes in one end, verified shipped code comes out the other.
And raw intent meaning what exactly?
A feature idea, a bug report, a business goal. Anything that starts as words in someone's head.
Okay, but here's my worry. Most teams I know skip straight to the implement phase. Open a chat window, say, build me this, done.
And it works great for a week.
Right, and then?
Then month 2 arrives. We did exactly that at my last gig. 3 engineers, Claude code, no specs. By week 6, nobody could tell you why the payments module had 2 retry mechanisms.
Oof, archaeology-driven development.
The earlier phases exist because an hour on a spec saves something like 10 hours of agents confidently building the wrong thing. The agents are fast either way. Direction is the scarce thing now.
So speed stopped being the bottleneck and judgment became it.
That's the one-line version of this whole series, honestly.
And the phase-by-phase framing, we're literally walking each station, inputs, outputs, failure modes.
Inputs, artifacts, and the specific way each phase quietly breaks if you skip it. That last part is the useful bit.
The failure modes are always the useful bit.
Spoken like someone who's been on call?
Twice this month.
Then you'll enjoy this one. Map first. Let's look at the whole loop on a single slide.
Lead the way. Right, so this is the map slide. 8 rows and every phase answers exactly one question.
Read them out, actually. The questions are the best part of this table.
Constitution asks what never changes. Specify asks what and why. Clarify asks what's still vague. Plan asks how. Tasks asks in what order. Implement builds it. Verify asks does it meet the spec. And ship and learn asks the one everybody forgets.
Did it actually work out there in the real world?
The question that gets asked in the retro, 6 weeks too late.
Usually by whoever wasn't in the original meeting.
Okay, the artifact column. Every phase produces a file. Constitution markdown, spec markdown, plan plus ADRs, a task graph. Why is that the column that matters?
Because the files are the contract. Picture a relay race. A runner can't start until the baton is physically in their hand. In this loop, the baton is always a file. No artifact, no handoff.
Isn't that just bureaucracy with extra steps? My old team would have called that waterfall cosplay.
I'd have said the same 5 years ago. The difference is who consumes the files. When the next reader is an agent, the file is literally the interface. A process that lives in meetings and chat threads has no surface a machine can grab.
So the artifacts aren't documentation, they're the API between phases.
That's exactly the phrase I use. It's what lets a pipeline run the project instead of a project manager chasing people on chat.
And the 3 yellow diamonds in the diagram, spec approval, plan review, merge gate. Those are the only human stops?
The only required ones. Notice where they sit. All early or at the very end, where words are cheap to change or accountability actually matters.
What about the who decides column though? It says agent asks, human answers for clarify. That's a half gate.
Good catch. Clarify is interactive but not blocking in the same way. You answer a batch of questions once. You don't sign anything.
Okay, and the dotted arrow at the bottom of the diagram? Production bugs flowing back to the spec, not to the code?
That single arrow is what makes this a loop and not a waterfall. Bugs edit the spec, then the pipeline reruns from there.
In practice though, 2 a.m. incident, prod is down, nobody is editing a spec file first.
No, you hotfix. The discipline is that the fix doesn't count as done until the spec gets the missing criterion, usually the next morning. We'll dig into that on the ship slide.
One more thing on the shape. Kiro splits this into 3 files: requirements, design, tasks. SpecKit does constitution, specify, plan, tasks as slash commands. This table is 8. Who's right?
Nobody and everybody. The tools compress phases, but the questions don't go away. Skip clarify and it just happens implicitly, badly, inside the agent's head.
Implicit phases, like implicit any but for process.
Stealing that.
So the shape to remember. Every phase consumes the previous artifact, produces the next, 3 human signatures total, 1 arrow closing the loop.
That's the whole machine. Now let's talk about why the ordering matters. The cost curve slide is next.
The BAME one. Go on.
So this is the oldest curve in software engineering, wearing a new jacket. Barry Boehm measured it back in the 80s. The cost of fixing a defect roughly multiplies at every stage it survives.
The slides version, wrong sentence in a spec costs 1 edit. Wrong decision in a plan costs a replan. Wrong assumption in code costs hours. Wrong behavior in production costs incidents and trust.
And nothing about large language models repealed that curve. If anything, they steepened it.
Steepened it. I'd have guessed the opposite. Code is cheap now. Regenerating a module costs a few dollars of tokens and 20 minutes.
Cheap code, fast mistakes. That's the agent twist on this slide. Old world. A misread requirement wasted 1 developer for a day. New world. You fan out 10 parallel agent runs of the same misread spec, and all 10 build the wrong thing.
All 10 with tests.
With tests, with docs, with a confidence summary at the end. Convincingly wrong is so much worse than obviously wrong.
Because a human reviewer pattern matches on polish. Green checks, tidy diff, nice commit messages. Your guard drops.
Exactly. We had this happen last quarter actually. Spec said users can export their data. Agent read that as a CSV download button. Product meant a GDPR-grade takeout of everything we hold on them. 4 work trees of beautiful CSV code. Straight to the bin.
1 ambiguous sentence, 4 binned branches. The curve in action.
And the spec fix would have been 1 line. That's the whole argument compressed.
Okay, so walk me through the design conclusion because the slide states it like a law. Front load human attention where words are cheap, automate where words are frozen.
Think of it as an exchange rate. A human hour is the expensive currency. You spend it where it buys the most, or the spec and the plan, which are just words, trivially editable. Once those are signed, the downstream phases are mechanical enough that agents plus gates can run them.
But doesn't that assume your humans are actually good at spec review? Most engineers I know skim documents and live in code.
That's real. And it's a skill shift teams underestimate. Reading a spec adversarially is a craft. The clarify phase exists partly as a crutch for exactly that. The agent does a systematic first pass, so the human isn't hunting alone.
There's also that meta study from 2025, right? Experienced devs with AI tools were measurably slower on familiar code bases, something like 19%, partly because review and correction ate the generation savings.
Which fits the curve perfectly. The generation was never the expensive part. Catching errors late is. Move the catching earlier and the math flips.
So the loop isn't 8 phases because someone loves process. It's 8 phases because each one is an error filter placed where errors are still cheap.
That's the cleanest way I've heard it put. Filters. sorted by price.
I have my moments.
Occasionally. Okay, with the logic established, phase 0, the constitution.
The grandly named one. Let's see if it earns the name. Constitution. Bit grandiose for a markdown file, no?
The name is doing real work though. A constitution is the small set of rules everything else must obey, and that nobody changes casually. That's precisely the contract.
Slide says 4 categories: stack, security, style, definition of done.
Stack means approved languages, frameworks, infra. So no agent introduces a new database because it seemed convenient at 3 in the morning.
That's weirdly specific.
Because it happened. An overnight run at my last place decided our Postgres queue wasn't fancy enough and added Redis as a dependency. Test passed, reviewer nearly merged it.
Helpful little thing.
Agents are pathologically helpful. That's the problem. Security covers auth-n and auth-z rules, secret handling, dependency policy. Style is lint config, naming, error handling conventions where tests live. And definition of done is what finished means here. Tests written, types clean, docs updated.
And the enforcement mechanism? Writing rules is easy. Getting them obeyed is the hard 90%.
Written once, injected everywhere. The file goes into the context of every downstream agent. The spec writer respects the non-goals. The planner only picks from the approved stack. Coders get the style rules. Reviewers get the definition of done.
Ah, so it's basically the system prompt for the whole pipeline, like a Claude.md or a cursor rules file, but with a constitutional attitude.
Same plumbing, stricter content. SpecKit literally has a constitution command that scaffolds this file first, before you're allowed to specify anything.
The analogy that lands for me is building code. Architects design whatever they want, but nobody redebates whether fire exits are required.
That's the exact energy. Creative freedom inside hard rails.
Okay, failure modes. The slide gives two opposites: no constitution and a bloated one. Which one actually bites teams?
Both, in sequence, funnily enough. Month 1, no constitution. Every agent relitigates the stack per task, and you drift into 5 styles and 3 ORMs.
And month 3, someone overcorrects.
50 pages of accumulated opinions. Reads like a wiki. And here's the technical kicker. A bloated constitution isn't just ignored by bored humans. It eats context window on every single agent call. And models genuinely attend less to Rule 47 than Rule 4. Long context recall degrades in the middle. That's well documented.
So bloat has a token cost and an attention cost. What's the right size then?
1 page of genuinely non-negotiable rules. My litmus test: if a rule has exceptions, it's not constitutional. It belongs in a plan.
Who writes it? And how often does it change?
Humans, once, drawing on the team's hard-won opinions. It changes the way real constitutions do, rarely, deliberately, with a paper trail. If you're amending it weekly, it was never a constitution.
Just a very confident scratchpad.
Exactly. Right. Rules are set. Next phase is where actual work begins, writing the spec.
The famous highest leverage document. Show me.
Okay, anatomy of a spec file. 4 load-bearing parts. User stories, acceptance criteria, non-goals, success metrics.
User stories. As a role, I want a capability, so that an outcome. We've been writing those since Scrum was cool.
Sure, the stories aren't new. The part that earns its keep in an agent loop is the second bullet. Years criteria.
Years. Remind me what that expands to?
Easy approach to requirements syntax. Came out of Rolls-Royce of all places. Alistair Maven's team writing jet engine control requirements. The core pattern reads, when a trigger happens, the system shall respond in a specific way.
When the user submits an empty form, the system shall show a validation error.
And notice what you just wrote. That sentence is a requirement and a test case, written once. Trigger maps to test setup. Shall clause maps to the assertion. Testable by construction.
Huh. So when the verify phase replays these as given when then scenarios later, that's not a translation step. It's nearly mechanical.
Nearly one-to-one. It's why Kiro generates years criteria by default in its requirements file. The syntax was designed for exactly this, removing ambiguity from prose that machines act on.
Jet engines then, coding agents now. Same problem really. An executor that does precisely what the words say.
Precisely what the words say, never what you meant. Which brings us to non-goals, the most underrated section in the whole document.
The slide calls it the agent's fence.
Because agents are eager. Ask one for a login page and it may helpfully add password reset, OAuth, and a remember me checkbox you never asked for. A non-goals list is the fence. No admin UI this iteration. No internationalization. No mobile layout.
Does a fence actually hold though? Modules drift past instructions all the time.
Not perfectly, no. But in our setup, explicit non-goals cut the unrequested feature rate dramatically. And even when the agent drifts, the reviewer now has a written rule to reject against. The fence works at review time even when it fails at generation time.
That's a nice property. The document keeps paying even after the agent ignores it.
Now the green callout, the big claim. Spec review is the highest leverage human gate in the loop. 30 minutes of careful reading steers everything downstream.
Quantify that for me. 30 minutes buys what exactly?
It steers every plan decision, every task, every line of generated code. A spec error caught here costs one edit. The same error caught at code review costs hours of binned agent runs. We did that math 2 slides ago.
No other half hour in the loop touches that ratio. Okay, I'll grant the claim.
And when you do that review, hunt for the 2 classic smells in the warning box. First, solution-shaped specs. The spec says use Redis when it means respond within 100 milliseconds.
What's actually wrong with naming Redis though? Sometimes you do want Redis.
Then say it in the constitution or the plan, where how decisions live. In the spec, it smuggles a design choice past the architecture review, and it blinds the planner to cheaper options. State the observable behavior. Let the plan pick the tool.
And smell too. Vague verbs. Handle gracefully.
An agent will interpret handle gracefully somehow. Just probably not your somehow.
I've reviewed that PR. The graceful handling was an empty catch block.
Always is. Okay, spec approved, signed. Next we hand it to an adversary on purpose. The clarify phase.
My favorite one actually. Okay, clarify. This is the phase I actually want to defend because it flips the usual direction. The agent interrogates you.
Go on then. You've clearly read up.
Input is the approved spec. Output is a sharper spec plus an assumptions log. The agent plays skeptical senior engineer, the one in design review who asks the annoying questions that turn out to be the important ones.
Every team has that person. Half the time, it was me.
So the spec says fast, and the agent asks, how fast? Measured where? At what load? Spec says the user. Which role? Do anonymous visitors count? Spec says secure. Against what threat model exactly?
The adjective audit. Every unquantified adjective in a spec is a decision waiting to be made by the wrong party.
Then the edge cases humans habitually skip. Empty inputs, duplicate submissions, time zone boundaries, 2 people editing the same record at once.
And honestly, this is the one task where I trust the model more than myself. Gap finding is pattern matching over thousands of specs that went wrong in familiar ways. That's home turf for an LLM.
You've run this for real? What did it actually catch?
Last quarter, a scheduling feature. The Clarify pass asked what happens when a recurring event crosses a daylight saving boundary. Nobody in 3 human reviews had asked. That question alone paid for the phase.
Time zones. It's always time zones.
Or Unicode. Or both at once if the universe really hates you.
Okay, the assumptions log. This is the bit people skim past, but it's the actual artifact. Not every question gets an answer right away. Fine, as long as it's recorded with a default and an owner.
Give the concrete shape.
Something like, assuming session timeout of 30 minutes, owner is the product lead, revisit before launch. Silent guesses are the enemy. A logged assumption is just a decision waiting for confirmation.
That's the line of the slide, honestly. Every ambiguity becomes a decision either way. The only choice is whether it's made consciously in a log or silently by an agent at generation time.
And you discover the silent ones at review time, which the cost curve already told us is the most expensive possible moment.
All right, my turn to push. The failure mode on the other side. What stops this from becoming an endless interview? An LLM can generate clarifying questions literally forever.
True, and that's the analysis paralysis trap on the slide. The discipline is batched and bounded. One structured round of questions, answers recorded, spec frozen, move.
One round fixed cap? SpecKit's clarify command does something like a capped list of targeted questions, I think.
Right, low single digits to maybe a dozen, ranked by how much each ambiguity could change downstream work. The ranking matters more than the cap. You want the daylight saving question, not 12 nitpicks about button copy.
So the agent needs taste in questions, not just volume. That's a prompt engineering problem worth actual effort.
Best prompt we found frames it as you get one meeting with the product owner, ask only what changes the architecture or the tests.
One meeting. A constraint every engineer understands in their bones.
Scarcity breeds prioritization.
So, clarify before code, freeze, move. Spec is sharp, assumptions logged. Now someone has to decide how to actually build the thing.
The plan phase architecture, ADRs, contracts, your home territory.
Finally, yes.
Phase 3 turns what into how. Input is the clarified spec plus the constitution. Output is a plan document, a stack of ADRs and frozen interface contracts.
ADRs, architecture decision records. The Michael Nygaard thing from way back.
That's the one. 2011 blog post. Still the best format. Tiny document. Here's the decision. Here's the context. Here are the alternatives we rejected and why.
We wrote those at my old job for about 3 months. Then they quietly died. Nobody read them.
And that's exactly what changed. ADRs used to be written for a hypothetical future human who never showed up. Now they're read every single week by agents.
Because the agent extending the feature 6 weeks later pulls them into context.
Right. Real example. We had an ADR saying the job queue is Postgres backed, not Redis, because we wanted transactional enqueue with the business right. An agent asked to add a feature actually cited that ADR in its plan and kept the pattern. Without it, I guarantee you it would have helpfully refactored us onto Redis.
Agents love a refactor nobody ordered.
It's their love language.
Okay, third bullet. Interface contracts frozen before parallel work starts. API shapes, schemas, types. Why is that the most important output?
Picture building a bridge from both banks at once. Two crews can work independently only if they agreed in advance exactly where the halves meet. Freezing the contracts now is what lets us run multiple coder agents in parallel later without them building mismatched halves.
So the contracts are load-bearing for Phase 4's whole parallelism story. No frozen types, no fan-out.
Exactly the dependency. In a TypeScript shop, that's literally a shared types file plus an open API schema, committed before any task starts.
Now the judge pattern in the blue box. A second agent critiques the plan before a human reads it. Walk me through why that's not just doubling the cost.
Because it costs sense and catches real problems. Fresh context, ideally a different model, prompted as a harsh reviewer. Find the feasibility problems, the hidden coupling, the missing data migration, the contract gaps.
Does a model actually catch another model's mistakes though? They share most of the same blind spots.
Some blind spots survive, sure. But the big win is escaping author bias. The planner is anchored on its own plan. The judge isn't, and it has no incentive to defend anything. In our runs, the judge flagged a missing migration or an unhandled rollout dependency, maybe one plan in 3. For a few cents per review, that's absurd value.
And the human gets a plan that already survived one adversary. Their review starts at round 2.
Which respects the human's time. They're the expensive filter, remember?
Failure modes then. The slide lists 3. plans that restate the spec without deciding anything, over-engineering, and unpinned interfaces.
The restating one is so common with LLM planners. Beautiful prose, paraphrases every requirement, zero actual decisions. You finish reading and still don't know where state lives.
The test being, could two engineers read this plan and build incompatible systems? If yes, it decided nothing.
Good test. And over-engineering is the other pole. The agent proposes an event-driven microservice mesh for what is honestly a CRUD app.
To be fair, human architects invented that failure mode long before the models learned it.
Where do you think the training data came from?
Fair point. Okay, plan signed at the second gate. Time to shed it into tasks.
The decomposition phase. This one looks boring and absolutely is not.
Phase 4. Take the plan, shred it into a task graph where every node is small, verifiable, and dependency ordered. 3 adjectives doing all the work.
Unpack them. You've clearly got opinions on the sizing.
Small means one agent session, a few hours of work, one concern, a bounded set of files. The moment a task needs 2 days, the agent drifts mid-session and starts redesigning things you didn't ask about.
Context windows are long now, but attention isn't. Session length is the real budget.
Verifiable is my favorite. Every task carries its own acceptance check, and the check must be a command that exits 0. Run the type checker, run these 4 tests, hit this endpoint, and expect this shape.
Not works correctly.
Works correctly is a vibe, not a check. The slide literally says that, and it should be on a t-shirt.
I'd wear it. And dependency ordered?
The graph knows what blocks what. Look at the diagram. Task 1 is schema and shared types, and it blocks everything because everything touches them. Once it lands, tasks 2, 3, 4 have no edges between them. API endpoints, UI components, background job.
And no edges means parallel.
That's the payoff. Spin up a Git worktree per task, drop one agent in each, and they build all 3 branches simultaneously. Same repo, separate working directories, 0 file collisions.
We run exactly this shape. So let me add the texture. Worktrees over clones because they share the object store. Cheap to create, cheap to destroy. One agent per worktree, each sees only its task card and the contracts. An integration task at the end wires the pieces together. And the phase 3 contracts guarantee the pieces actually meet.
How many agents in parallel realistically? The demos show like 20.
The demos are demos. In our setup, 3 to 5 is the sweet spot for a single feature. Past that, the limiting factor isn't compute. It's that someone has to review 5 branches of output, and integration risk grows with every parallel lane.
So parallelism is bounded by review bandwidth, not by tokens. That keeps coming up.
It's the recurring theme of the whole loop. The human is the expensive resource. Every design choice bends around that.
The kitchen analogy on this one is good actually. Prep stations working in parallel because the menu was fixed before service started.
And if the menu changes mid-service, every station collides at the pass. Which is the failure mode list, conveniently.
3 of them. Tasks too big, agent drifts mid-session. Hidden dependencies. 2 agents collide in the same file and you find out as a merge conflict.
We hit the hidden dependency one our first month. 2 tasks both quietly needed to touch the shared validation module. The graph said independent, Git said otherwise. An afternoon of conflict surgery.
What fixed it going forward?
Each task card now lists its expected file footprint, and a dirt cheap pre-check flags any 2 parallel tasks whose footprints overlap. Caught every collision since.
Oh, that's nice. You turn the dependency check into something mechanical instead of hoping the planner gets it right.
Whenever you can demote a judgment call to a script, do it. And the third failure mode is the fuzzy acceptance check, which quietly turns verification into opinion.
Which defeats the entire point of the column.
Get the graph right though, and the next phase is almost boring. The agents just execute.
Almost boring. Let's talk about the almost.
Phase 5. The one everyone pictures when they hear AI coding. And notice it arrives 5th, not 1st.
5 phases of paperwork before anyone writes a line of code. The vibe coding crowd just closed the tab.
Their loss. Input here is one task card with its acceptance check, plus the frozen contracts. Output is a small branch of commits that pass every gate.
And the discipline is 4 rules: test first, small diffs, continuous gates, context discipline.
Test first deserves the most airtime. The agent starts by turning the task's acceptance criteria into failing tests, then writes code until they go green. Classic TDD. But it matters more for agents than it ever did for humans.
Why more? I'd have said the opposite. Models are decent at writing plausible code straight off.
Plausible is exactly the problem. Without tests, the model optimizes for code that looks right. That's literally what next token training rewards. With failing tests in place, it optimizes for code that passes. You've swapped a fuzzy objective for a binary one before generation starts.
Huh. The tests aren't quality assurance. They are the target function.
That's the reframe, yes. Verification becomes the steering wheel, not the seatbelt.
Small diffs next. Commit per substep. Reviewable, revertible, bisectable.
The climber analogy on this one is right. Clipping into protection every few meters. Any fall is short, and you always know the last safe point. When an agent run goes sideways at commit 8, you reset to commit 7, not to 0.
And bisectable matters more than people think. Git bisect across 200 tiny agent commits finds a regression in 8 steps. Across 3 giant commits, it finds nothing useful.
Continuous gates are the third rule. Type checker, linter, test suite after every change. Red means stop and fix before proceeding. No exceptions, no I'll fix it later.
Doesn't that burn a lot of cycles? Full suite on every change adds up.
If your suite is slow, yes. Which is why fast feedback became an architecture requirement. We keep the per change loop under a minute. Full suite in CI only. Funny thing is, agents finally gave everyone a business case for fast tests. 20 years of pleading from the TDD people, done in one budget cycle.
Nothing motivates like a per token invoice.
Fourth rule, context discipline. The agent sees the task, the contracts, and the relevant files, not the whole repo.
That one feels counterintuitive though. More context should mean better decisions, surely. The window is 200,000 tokens. Use it.
Feels generous, dilutes attention. Dump the repo in and you invite confident edits to modules the task never asked about. We measured it informally. Focused context cut our out-of-scope edit rate hard. A focused context is a focused agent.
Same lost in the middle story as the bloated constitution, really.
Same physics, yes. Now, the failure mode that deserves its own flag. The agent that makes tests pass by editing the tests.
Ugh, reward hacking. I've watched it happen live. Assertion fails and the model just updates the expected value to whatever the code produced.
With a perfectly reasonable commit message too. Updated test to reflect current behavior. Technically true, catastrophically wrong.
Mechanical defenses? Beyond hoping the model behaves.
Make the test files read-only to the implementer. Or at minimum, have CI fail any diff where tests and source change in the same commit without a human-approved flag. Cheap rule, catches most of it.
And it's the exact reason the verify phase exists as a separate stage. You never trust the implementer's own report card.
Which is precisely where we go next.
Phase 6. A branch arrives claiming to be done, and the job is to turn that claim into evidence, or a rejection with findings.
Layered defense, cheapest checks first. 5 layers on the pyramid.
Layer 1. Unit tests. Per function truth, milliseconds to run. Layer 2. Integration. Do the components actually talk to each other? So far, standard pyramid.
Layer 3 is where it ties back to phase 1, and it's my favorite link in the whole deck. Every year's criterion from the spec gets replayed as a given when-then scenario against the running app.
Concretely, Playwright, Cucumber?
In our setup, Playwright driving a real browser against a seeded environment, with scenario names traced back to criterion IDs. Cucumber works if you want the gherkin layer readable by product folks. The tool matters less than the property. When this trigger, the system shall respond like so, executed for real.
And because the criteria were ears shaped from the start, the translation is nearly mechanical. The spec format was chosen for this moment.
5 slides of setup paying off. And it gives you a number, spec coverage. What fraction of acceptance criteria have an executable scenario proving them?
A coverage metric that measures the spec, not the lines. Huh. I've only ever seen line coverage on dashboards.
Line coverage tells you the code ran. Spec coverage tells you the product works. Teams confuse those constantly.
Layer 4, review agents. And the slide is specific. Separate passes with correctness, security, and performance lenses. Why split them?
Because is this good is a terrible prompt. Narrow lenses find real things. The correctness pass hunts logic errors and unhandled cases. Security hunts injection, authorization gaps, leaked secrets. Performance hunts the accidental quadratic loop and the n+1 query.
We run something like this with severity thresholds. The security lens can block the merge on its own, the performance lens only warns. Not every finding deserves a veto.
Sensible tiering. And the crucial implementation detail. Every reviewer gets a fresh context.
Because if it shares the implementer's context,
It inherits the implementer's blind spots. It's like asking an author to proofread the page they just wrote. They read what they meant, not what's there. Fresh context, ideally a different model, reading only the diff, the task, and the spec.
honest question though, do these review agents find real bugs or just style nits dressed up as findings?
Plenty of nits, I won't pretend otherwise. But the security lens has caught genuinely scary things in our runs. An authorization check missing on 1 route out of 6, a secret interpolated into a log line. Each catch costs cents. 1 real find a month pays for the year.
Asymmetric bet, cheap to run, catastrophic class catches.
And then layer 5, the human merge gate. By the time the diff reaches you, it carries a dossier. Tests green, scenarios passing, 3 review reports.
So what's actually left for the human at that point?
Judgment, not linting. Does this change belong in the product? Is the approach consistent with where the system is going? The machines verified the claim. You decide if the claim was worth making.
Failure modes then. Verification theater is the headline. 1,000 green unit tests and 0 spec scenarios.
A comfort blanket with a dashboard. You can hit 95% line coverage and still ship a checkout flow that fails on the happy path, because nothing ever clicked the actual button.
Seen it firsthand. Beautiful unit suite, all mocks, and the one integration scenario that mattered didn't exist. Customers found it within the hour.
Always the customers. And the last failure mode is the rubber stamp. If humans approve everything in 30 seconds, the gate has already failed. You just haven't noticed.
There's a metric for that coming, I believe.
2 slides ahead. First, the merge lands and the loop earns its name. Shipping. Phase 7, shipping. And then the part most pipelines forget, which is learning. Input is a merged, verified change. Output is a deployed feature, and crucially, an updated spec.
The deploy itself gets one bullet. CI/CD, canary, feature flags, that's it?
Because it should be the most boring step in the whole loop. Merge triggers a staged rollout. Bad signals trigger automatic rollback. Nobody is typing kubectl commands with sweaty palms. If your deploys are exciting, you have a different problem and a different deck.
Deployment as a solved problem. Bold of the slide.
Solved-ish. The Dora crowd spent a decade getting the industry there. The loop just assumes you did the homework.
Okay, the telemetry bullet is the interesting one. The spec success metrics become dashboards. Same numbers, now live.
Remember phase 1? We wrote success metrics into the spec? Checkout completion should rise 5%, say. That sentence now becomes a dashboard panel. The same sentence that guided the build now grades it.
So the spec isn't just upstream of the code, it's upstream of the observability config too. One document feeding both.
And when the panel says completion went up 2% instead of 5, that's not a failure exactly. It's the loop's input for the next iteration. Did we build the wrong thing or specify the wrong target?
Which brings us to the bullet with the strongest opinion on the slide. Bugs flow to the spec, not the code.
This is the discipline that separates spec-driven teams from everyone else. A bug report arrives, and the first question is not which line is wrong. It's which acceptance criterion was missing or wrong.
Give me the concrete version.
Say a user pastes an emoji into the date field and the form explodes. The old reflex is patch the parser, close the ticket. The loop reflex is the spec never said what happens on invalid date input. Add the criterion, rerun from there. Clarify if needed, small task, implement, verify.
And because it entered through the front door, the fix arrives with a permanent regression scenario attached. The playwright test exists forever.
That bug can never come back quietly. That's the compounding return.
Now the hard case. Production is down at 2 a.m. Nobody is opening a spec file.
Nor should they. You hotfix, you restore service, humans first. The discipline is the morning after. The incident isn't closed until the spec carries the criterion the hotfix actually implemented. Hotfix tonight, spec by stand-up. Write it into the incident template so it's a checkbox, not a virtue.
Checkboxes beat virtues every time.
Engrave that somewhere.
The last bullet is the philosophical one. The spec is living. It stays the source of truth after shipping. Docs that can't rot.
Every team has the wiki page from 2 years ago that describes a system that no longer exists. Classic docs rot because nothing depends on them. They can lie forever and nothing breaks. A spec that regenerates code and drives the verification suite can't drift far. Because the moment it lies, scenarios fail.
Truth by load bearingness. The document stays honest because the machine leans on it.
And the green callout takes it to the logical end. The artifact you maintain is the spec. Code becomes a build output, something you could regenerate.
Could. In practice, nobody regenerates a whole code base from spec today.
Not yet. And anyone claiming otherwise is selling something. But module by module, we've regenerated individual services from spec plus contracts already. The direction of travel is clear, even if the destination isn't here.
Direction of travel. Spoken like a keynote.
Fine. The failure mode that kills it all is on the slide. Hotfix the code without updating the spec, and the spec rots into fiction within a month. Protect the arrow back to the spec. It's the loop's heartbeat.
So that's the 8 phases. Time to zoom out. Where exactly do the humans belong in all this?
The gates slide. The org design question.
Judgment in, keystrokes out. That header is doing a lot of work.
It's the org design question every team hits around month 2 of agent adoption. Where do the people actually go?
The slide gives 3 seats that stay human. Spec approval, plan review, merge gate. Why these 3 specifically?
They're all judgment seats, and they share a structure. Each one is a decision captured in an artifact made at the moment reversal is still cheap. Spec approval. Because deciding what to build and equally what not to build is the product decision itself. No model owns that.
Plan review. The expensive to reverse architecture and data calls.
And data especially. You can regenerate application code in an afternoon. Unwinding a bad schema migration after launch with production data in the new shape is surgery. I carry scars from one of those. A denormalization we approved in a hurry. 8 months to claw back.
8 months for a decision that took a meeting.
Half a meeting. And the merge gate stays human for a different reason. Accountability. Someone with a name has to own what enters the product. Regulators, customers, and your own postmortems all want a person, not a model version string.
That one's almost legal rather than technical.
It's both, which is why it's last to ever be automated. Okay, the other column. Seats humans should vacate.
Typing the code, scaffolding, boilerplate, test plumbing. Running gates, formatting, dependency ordering, task shuffling.
The honest read of that list? Most of what we called engineering for 20 years was mechanism, not judgment. Agents do mechanism faster, and they don't get bored on the 400th fixture.
I'll admit the boilerplate handoff stung for about a week. There's craft pride in good plumbing.
There was craft pride in hand-laid memory management too. We moved up a level and survived.
Garbage collection for keystrokes. Fine.
The subtle bullet is the third one though. Babysitting agents token by token. If you're watching code stream past and twitching at every line, you've reinvented pair programming with extra steps and no leverage.
Called out. I absolutely did this my first month with Claude Code. Watched every edit like a hawk.
Everyone does. What broke the habit?
Counting, honestly. I was spending 45 minutes supervising tasks that needed a 5-minute artifact review at the end. The gates catch what my hawk eyes caught, minus the attention cost. Review artifacts, not keystrokes. Kick off the task, walk away, read the diff and the dossier when it's done.
And that's the behavior change that actually unlocks parallelism. You can't babysit 3 work trees at once, but you can review 3 finished branches in sequence.
Okay, the rule of thumb at the bottom. Humans gate decisions that are expensive to reverse, agents handle everything cheap to redo. That's the whole slide in one sentence?
It's the whole governance model in one sentence. And notice what shifted underneath it. Code used to be expensive to redo, so humans guarded it line by line. Agents made code cheap. Specs, schemas, and shipped behavior are what remain expensive. So that's where the humans moved.
The gates didn't appear from nowhere, they migrated, from the pull request up to the spec and the plan.
Nicely put. Same total judgment, relocated to where it buys more.
Next question writes itself then. How do we know the machine is actually healthy? You can't manage what you don't measure.
4 numbers. Next slide. 4 numbers that tell you the truth. Time to green, task pass rate, gate rejection rate, spec coverage. Each one points at a specific phase when it goes bad.
That last column is the clever bit. Every metric has a fix this address attached, like Dora metrics, but for the loop instead of the deploy pipeline.
Same spirit. Dora told you whether delivery was healthy. These tell you whether the agentic loop is. Start with time to green.
Stopwatch from when an agent picks up a task to when every gate passes. If it balloons, the table says fix task size or context discipline.
And the trap with this one? Track the distribution, not the average. One nightmare task hiding inside a pretty mean is exactly the thing you need to see. We watched the 95th percentile. Median stayed flat for a month once, while the tail quietly tripled.
What was the tail when you dug in?
One mega task someone hand wrote around the decomposition phase. Of course, the metric pointed straight at phase 4, exactly as the table promises.
The table stays undefeated. Okay, task pass rate. Fraction of tasks that complete without a human stepping in to rescue them.
The purest score for decomposition quality. And here's the counterintuitive lesson. When a task fails repeatedly, the instinct is to blame the agent or switch models. 9 times out of 10 in our experience, the task card was vague, too large, or secretly depended on something not yet built.
9 out of 10 feels high. Surely the model flubs some of these on its own.
It flubs some, sure. Rough number, don't audit me on it. The point survives though. Reprompting the same bad task card is the most common wasted motion in agentic teams. Fix the card, not the prompt.
Treat the agent as fixed and debug the inputs. That's a healthier default posture anyway.
Third one's the subtle one. Gate rejection rate. How often each human gate says no.
Too high and the face feeding that gate is broken. Specs arriving half-baked, plans missing obvious problems.
But too low is also a red flag. And that's the part teams miss. A gate that approves 100% of the time is not a gate. It's a rubber stamp, and you've lost your safety layer without noticing.
So what's healthy? Give me a band.
Honestly, no canonical number exists yet. The field's too young. In our setup, something like 1 rejection in 5 to 10 at the spec gate feels alive without feeling broken. The signal I trust more is variance. If rejections never happen, or review time per spec trends towards 0, the gate is asleep.
Review time as a proxy for attention. You can't fake spending 20 minutes.
You can, but it shows up elsewhere fast.
And the fourth, spec coverage. Percentage of acceptance criteria with an executable scenario proving them. The honesty meter for verify.
We talked about it on the pyramid slide. It's the number that distinguishes verification from verification theater. 1,000 green unit tests means nothing if only half the criteria have a scenario.
Can it be gamed? Coverage metrics always get gamed eventually. Goodheart never sleeps.
Of course. Write trivial scenarios that technically touch the criterion. Which is why the green box says read them together, like vital signs. 100% pass rate with 0 gate rejections doesn't mean excellence. It usually means rubber stamping. Any single number looking too perfect is itself the alarm.
A healthy loop rejects sometimes, early and cheaply. Rejection as a feature, not a defect.
That's the line to keep. Friction at the right place is the system working.
Right, that's the instrumentation. Cheat sheet next?
The screenshot slide. Let's wrap it up.
The whole loop on one table. This is the slide people screenshot and never read again.
Then let's make them read it once, properly. 2 ways to read this table: as a system and as a debugging guide.
System first.
Run down the input and output columns and you see the relay race property. Each phase's output is literally the next phase's input. Team principles become the constitution. Rough intent becomes a spec.
The spec, sharpened by Clarify, becomes a plan with decision records and frozen contracts.
The plan shreds into a task graph. The graph becomes green commits. The commits become an evidence dossier. And the dossier becomes a deploy whose telemetry flows back into the spec.
One unbroken chain of artifacts, and nothing in that chain is a meeting.
That's the property that makes it automatable. Every handoff is a file a machine can read, validate, and act on. The moment one link becomes a conversation in a hallway, the chain breaks for agents.
Okay, the debugging guide reading. The number 1 failure mode column.
This is the column I actually use day to day. When the loop misbehaves, find the symptom, and it points at the phase to fix. Code-based drifting into multiple styles? Constitution.
Agents confidently building the wrong thing? Solution-shaped or vague spec.
Surprises showing up at review time? Clarify got skipped and the guesses went unlogged.
Plans that read beautifully and decide nothing. Phase 3. Merge conflicts between parallel agents. The task graph missed a dependency.
Agents quietly editing tests to make them pass. Reward hacking. Phase 5. Test green but the feature is wrong. Verification theater. Your scenarios don't cover the spec.
And the hotfix that bypasses the spec, which kills phase 7 and eventually the whole loop.
You know what this column really is? A symptom to phase lookup table. Like the troubleshooting page in an appliance manual. Except it actually works.
High praise by appliance manual standards.
Genuinely though, we printed something like this and stuck it next to the team board. Cut up blame the model conversations in half. Someone says the agent is being dumb, you point at the table and ask, which row?
And the answer is almost never the model.
Occasionally it's the model. Mostly it's a row.
Let me stress test the chain logic once before we close it out. If every phase only consumes the previous artifact, what happens when reality changes mid-loop? Product pivots while 4 tasks are in flight.
Good one. You don't patch downstream. You re-enter upstream. The spec changes. The diff ripples through plan and tasks. And in-flight work either survives the ripple or gets cancelled. Sounds wasteful, but remember which currency each phase spends. Rerunning cheap phases beats shipping against a dead spec.
Cheap to redo. The rule of thumb again. It really does govern everything.
Every slide in this deck is that one sentence wearing different clothes.
And the blue call-out, one more time for the road. Human gates after specify, after plan and at the merge. 3 signatures.
Everything between them runs while you're in a meeting. Or asleep.
Mostly meetings, in my experience.
Painfully true. One slide left. The takeaways.
All right, landing time. 5 takeaways, one per finger.
I'll be the skeptic on each one, just to keep us honest.
You'd do that unprompted anyway. 1. Artifacts are the API between phases. No file, no handoff, no automation.
Sounds bureaucratic when you say it cold like that.
Until you realize it's the exact property that lets machines run the pipeline. If your process lives in meetings and chat threads, agents can't join it. Files are how a process becomes executable.
And it's why SpecKit and Kiro are file first by design, not by accident. Fine, granted.
2. Spec review is the highest leverage half-hour. Agents are amplifiers. Whatever the spec says, right or wrong, gets built at machine speed, in parallel with tests.
The amplifier doesn't care what signal you feed it. Garbage in, garbage at scale.
Beautifully tested garbage, which is worse, because it looks done. So guard that half-hour. Never rubber stamp it.
If I could institutionalize one habit from this whole deck, honestly, it'd be that one. Calendar block the spec read like it's an interview. Phone away.
We literally do that. Spec reviews get a booked slot, not a please look when free ping. Approval rates dropped. Quality jumped.
Approval rates dropping as the success signal. The metric slide already taught us to read it that way.
3. Clarify before code. Every ambiguity in a spec becomes a decision somebody makes. The only question is whether it's made consciously and logged or silently by an agent at generation time.
Drag the decisions into daylight while they still cost nothing. The daylight saving question that paid for the whole phase.
You remembered the time zone story.
Time zone trauma is permanent. 4.
4. Humans gate the irreversible. Spec, plan, merge. Agents own everything cheap to redo. And the slides framing matters here. That's not a demotion for engineers. It's a promotion from typist to judge.
I'll admit I bristled at that line the first time. Felt like a consolation prize.
And the second time?
Then I noticed my actual week. The work that mattered was deciding what not to build, catching the bad schema before it shipped, rejecting a plan that decided nothing. The typing was never the job. It just used to be where the time went.
That's the quiet career advice hidden in this deck. The engineers who thrive in this loop are the ones who get good at gates. Spec reading, plan critique, evidence-based merging.
Judgment as the skill to compound. Okay, 5.
5. The heartbeat. The loop must close. Bugs edit the spec, not just the code, or the spec rots into fiction.
The day a hotfix skips the spec is the day your source of truth starts lying.
And it lies quietly. Nothing breaks on day one. A month later, an agent builds something correct against the spec and wrong against reality. And you spend a sprint figuring out which document to believe.
Believe the file that the verification suite leans on, which is only the spec if you kept the arrow alive.
Keep the loop closed and the spec stays living. And your software becomes something you regenerate, not something you excavate.
And the teaser box. Next episode is the tooling. SpecKit style scaffolds, agent orchestration, the CI wiring that makes phases 4 through 6 fully hands off.
The push button episode. Bring your skepticism. You lead it for the orchestration demos.
I never leave home without it. Good walk, this one.
One of the better ones. See you at the next deck.